The morning Seren nearly gave away the last of what she had. She did not know it would be the morning that changed everything. She had been up since 5, the way she always was. The soup pot was already on the stove, a thin broth of tomatoes and ground crayfish that she had stretched as far as it could go. She portioned it into 12 small cups, 12, because that was how many she could sell before the early crowd thinned out at the bus depot on Larkin Street. 12 cups at $2 each, $24. Enough for the bus fare, enough for a small bag of dried beans, enough to keep Mama Dora's medication from running out another week. That was how Seren calculated her days. Not in hours, in portions. She wrapped the cups carefully in a cloth to keep them warm, loaded her small wheeled cart, and pulled it down 3 flights of stairs the way she had done every morning for 2 years. The building's elevator had been broken since March. The landlord, Mr. Fenn, had promised to fix it in April, then June. It was now October. Outside, the air had that sharp bite that comes to southern Ontario in autumn, the kind that gets under your coat before you've had time to button it properly. Seren buttoned hers quickly, tucked her chin down, and started toward the depot. She had a system at the depot. She parked her cart near the bench under the broken awning, broken since last winter, but the pole still gave some shelter. And she waited for the 6:15 to pull in. That was always the fullest bus. Construction workers, mostly. Overnight shift nurses heading home. A few delivery drivers starting early. They were the ones who bought without hesitating, who said thank you like they meant it, who sometimes came back the next morning asking if she had anything with pepper. She had sold 4 cups by 6:40 when she first noticed the woman. She was sitting on the far end of the bench, the end closest to the street, where the wind caught worst. She had no coat. She had a thin grey cardigan, the kind with the buttons missing at the collar, and she was holding her own arms the way people do when they are trying to hold themselves together. Her shoes were wrong for the weather, canvas flats, one with the sole beginning to separate at the toe. She was not young. Somewhere past 70, Seren guessed, with hair gone white and a face that had seen decades of weather harder than this. She was not asking anyone for anything. That was what caught Seren's attention. Most people who sat there at that hour were waiting for something. A bus, a call, a ride. This woman was just sitting, still, eyes on the pavement across the street, as though she had forgotten how to want anything. Seren watched her for a few minutes, sold 2 more cups, watched her again. She told herself it was not her business. She told herself she had 12 cups and needed the money from all 12. She told herself Mama Dora's prescription cost $47, and she was already short 11 of that. Then the woman coughed, a dry, rattling cough that she tried to muffle with the back of her wrist, and something in Seren shifted without her permission. She picked up one of the cups. She walked over. "Excuse me," she said. "Have you eaten this morning?" The woman looked up slowly, like someone waking from a long sleep. Her eyes were dark brown, clear and sharp in a way that didn't match the rest of her exhaustion. She looked at Seren the way people look when they are deciding whether to trust something. "I'm fine," the woman said. Her accent was West African, soft at the edges, the kind worn smooth by years in other places. "I have extra," Seren said. It was not true. She said it anyway. She held out the cup. The woman looked at it for a long moment. Then she took it with both hands, the way people receive things when they have learned not to take anything for granted. "Thank you," the woman said quietly. Seren nodded and went back to her cart. She had 11 cups left. She needed $24. She would figure it out. She always figured it out. She didn't think much about the woman after that morning. There were too many other things to think about. Mama Dora had been coughing too. A different cough, deeper, the kind that had been there since the summer and was not getting better. The doctor at the walk-in clinic had said it might be nothing. Had said might the way doctors say it when they mean we'd need more tests to know for certain. And those tests cost money you probably don't have. He had given her a prescription for something that helped a little and referred her to a specialist Seren had not been able to get an appointment with for another 6 weeks. 6 weeks was a long time when someone you loved was coughing through the night. Seren's mother had come to Canada 23 years ago from a small town outside Kumasi. She had come alone, with 2 suitcases and the address of a cousin who had since moved to Calgary. She had worked cleaning offices, then working at a laundry, then eventually at a garment factory in Brampton, where she had spent 15 years standing on a concrete floor, 10 hours a day until her knees gave out. Mama Dora did not talk about those years much. When she did, she talked about them the way people talk about a war they survived, matter-of-factly, without drama, as though the difficulty of it was simply the price of being here. Seren had been born here, raised here. She spoke English without an accent and knew nothing about Kumasi, except the photographs in the album Mama Dora, kept on the shelf above the television. But she had inherited something from her mother that she could not have named precisely, a way of moving through hardship without collapsing under it, a sense that you kept going not because the situation demanded it, but because stopping was simply not something you considered. She kept the soup business going the way Mama Dora had once kept everything going, steadily, without fuss. The second time she saw the woman was 4 days later. Same bench, same cardigan, but this time the woman was sitting differently, hunched forward, one hand pressed flat against her chest, eyes closed. Seren left her cart with the teenager who sold phone cases from a folding table nearby, Dio, who was reliable, and walked over quickly. "Ma'am," she said. She put her hand on the woman's shoulder, gently. The woman's eyes opened. She took a breath that sounded like it cost her something. "I think I need to sit for a moment," the woman said. "You've been sitting," Seren said. "How long have you been here?" The woman thought about it. "Since last night, I think." Seren pulled out her phone and called for the non-emergency health line. The dispatcher asked questions. Seren answered them, watching the woman's face the whole time. Then she sat down on the bench and did not leave. She stayed there for 2 hours. She missed the morning rush entirely. She sold 3 cups all day. An ambulance came eventually. The paramedics were efficient and kind. They asked the woman her name, and she gave it, Vivienne. They asked if she had family to contact, and she was quiet for a moment before she said, "There is someone, but I don't want to worry them." Seren gave them her own number as a secondary contact. She didn't know why exactly. She just did it. She went home that evening with $7. She sat at the kitchen table for a while before she started planning the next day. A week passed without any word. Seren had almost stopped expecting it. Then a call came from a number she didn't recognize, with an area code that belonged to somewhere in the city's East End. She almost didn't answer. She was in the middle of portioning out the next morning's soup. "Is this Seren?" The voice was a man's, measured and careful. "Yes. My name is Theodore Asante. I believe you helped my mother last week, the La Klashkin Street bus depot. Her name is Vivienne." Seren set down the ladle. "Is she all right?" "She is recovering," the man said. "She had pneumonia, mild, fortunately. They caught it early enough." He paused. "Because of you, they say." Seren said she hadn't done very much. Theodore Asante said something careful and precise in response, the way people speak when they are choosing their words deliberately, because the words matter to them. "She told me what you did," he said. "Both times. The soup, and staying with her. She told me your name." He paused again. "My mother does not ask for help easily. For her to have accepted yours, that means something." Seren didn't know what to say to that. She said she was glad Vivienne was recovering. "I'd like to meet you," Theodore said. "If you're willing. I know that's an unusual thing to ask a stranger, but I'd like to thank you properly. And I'd like to hear about you if that's all right." She agreed to meet him. She wasn't sure why. She told herself it was just politeness. They met at a cafe on a Thursday afternoon. Seren arrived 5 minutes early because she was always 5 minutes early, a habit Mama Dora had instilled in her so thoroughly that being late to anything felt physically wrong. Theodore Asante was already there. He was in his mid-40s, she guessed, with a kind of stillness about him that suggested he was comfortable with silence. He stood when she came in, which surprised her a little. He bought her coffee and did not immediately fill the silence with talk. He asked about the soup business. He listened in a way that was different from how most people listen, not waiting for his turn to speak, but actually listening, noting details, asking follow-up questions that showed he had heard her correctly. She told him about the depot, about the 12 cups, about Mama Dora. He told her about his mother. Vivienne had immigrated from Cameroon 40 years ago, had spent 30 years building a textile business, first small, then larger, then substantial, had semi-retired 3 years ago, and since then had taken to disappearing for days at a time, visiting old parts of the city she remembered from when she first arrived, refusing a driver, refusing most help. She says she needs to remember where she came from, Theodore said. I worry about her more than she will allow. She seems like someone who knows her own mind, Seren said. Theodore smiled at that. That is the most precise description of her I've ever heard from someone who only met her twice. They talked for 2 hours. When Seren looked at her watch and said she needed to get back, Theodore nodded and walked her to the door. Outside, he handed her an envelope. Please don't refuse this, he said, before she could speak. It isn't charity, it's thanks. There's a difference. She opened it on the bus home. It was enough to cover Mama Dora's medication for 3 months, and more besides. She sat with it in her lap for a long time, watching the city move past the window. That was not the end of it. That was, as it turned out, barely the beginning. Theodore called again the following week. He said his mother wanted to meet her. Seren agreed, though she felt the particular kind of nervousness that comes with meeting someone who had already decided something about you. Vivienne was nothing like what Seren had expected, though she was not sure what she had expected. The woman on the bench, thin, cold, holding herself together, had been replaced by someone who filled the room with a different kind of weight. Not loudness, presence. She sat in a high-backed chair in her apartment in the East End, a large, well-lit place with West African textiles on the walls and photographs crowding every surface. And she looked at Seren the way Seren imagined. A person looks at someone they have already made a judgment about, and are now simply confirming. Sit, Vivienne said. Not unkindly, just directly, Seren sat. My son tells me you sell soup from a cart at the bus depot, Vivienne said. Yes? Since when? 2 years. Before that, I worked at a food distribution center. Before that, I was studying food service management at the college. I had to stop when my mother got sick. Vivienne nodded slowly. She picked up her tea with both hands the same way she had picked up the soup cup at the depot, and Seren felt something move in her chest at the recognition of it. Why soup? Vivienne asked. You could sell many things. My mother's recipe, Seren said. People kept telling her she should sell it. She never did. I thought. She stopped. Started again. I thought at least one of us should. Vivienne was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I built my business on cloth, textiles. Do you know why? Seren said she didn't. Because my mother wove cloth, Vivienne said. She wove it by hand in a village where no one had money to buy it. I thought, at least one of us should sell it where people could. She looked at Seren steadily. You understand something that many people with more resources than you do not understand. You understand that what you have is worth something, that it came from someone, that it should not be wasted. Seren didn't know what to say. She said nothing. I want to help you, Vivienne said. Not because you helped me. You helped me before there was anything in it for you, which means you are not the kind of person who helps in order to receive. I'm not interested in rewarding transactions. I'm interested in building something. She set down her tea. There is a small commercial kitchen space I own on Pemberton Avenue. I haven't found the right use for it. I think perhaps I have now. The room was very quiet. I don't need a loan, Seren said carefully. I know, Vivienne said. I'm not offering one. I'm offering a partnership. You bring the recipe and the knowledge of what those people at that depot need. I bring the space and the contacts. We figure out the rest together. She paused. Think about it. Don't answer today. Go home and think about it, and come back when you've decided. Seren went home. She sat at the kitchen table. Mama Dora came in from her room, moving slowly, and sat across from her and asked what was wrong. Nothing's wrong, Seren said. Something happened today that I need to think about. Mama Dora looked at her for a moment. Then she said, Tell me. So Seren told her, all of it. The bench and the soup and the ambulance and Theodore and Vivienne and the kitchen on Pemberton Avenue. She told it the way she always told her mother things. Plainly, without embellishment, the way she had learned from watching Mama Dora tell things. When she finished, Mama Dora was quiet for a long moment. You gave her the soup, Mama Dora said finally. Yes, even though you needed the money. Yes. Mama Dora nodded slowly. She reached across the table and covered Seren's hand with hers. Her hand was warm in the way that hands are warm when they have spent decades working. Then you already knew the answer, Mama Dora said. Before any of this happened, the day you gave her the soup, you already knew what kind of person you were going to be. Seren called Theodore 3 days later. She asked to speak with Vivienne. When Vivienne picked up, Seren said, "I've thought about it. And I want to ask you one thing first," Seren said. "The partnership, is it real? Not charity dressed up as a partnership, but an actual partnership where I have a real say in what we build." There was a pause on the line. Then Vivienne said, "You remind me of myself at your age. I asked my first business partner the same question in almost those exact words." Another pause. "Yes, it is real." "Then yes," Seren said. "I'd like to try. It did not happen overnight. Nothing real does. There were months of planning, of paperwork, of licensing, of figuring out what the actual business model would look like." Vivienne introduced Seren to her contacts in the food distribution network she had built over decades. Seren learned things she had not known she needed to know. She also taught things about what the people at that bus depot actually wanted, what they could afford, what made them come back, what made them feel seen rather than managed. They started with a catering contract for a social service agency 2 blocks from the depot. Then a small lunch service for a construction company Vivienne knew. Then a community meal program through a local church, where Seren trained 2 people from the neighborhood to help cook. Mama Dora's appointment with the specialist finally came. The news was not as bad as Seren had feared and not as simple as she had hoped. But there was a treatment plan now, real and specific, and Seren could afford it. She still visited the depot sometimes, not to sell now, but out of habit. And because she liked the 615 crowd, their directness, their willingness to say thank you like they meant it. She sometimes sat on the bench under the broken awning, which the city had fixed in November, finally, and drank her own coffee and thought about the morning she had made a decision that she hadn't even fully registered as a decision. She had looked at a woman sitting in the cold with nothing, and she had thought, "I have something she doesn't have right now." And she had given it, not because she could afford to, but because it was the right thing to do with what you had. That was the whole story, when she laid it out plain. That was the part she kept coming back to. Not the partnership, not the kitchen on Pemberton Avenue, not even the treatment plan for Mama Dora's lungs. It was the moment before any of that, when no one was watching and nothing was guaranteed, and she had handed over a cup of soup she could not afford to give. She had not known what she was starting. She had just known it was right. And sometimes, that is the only thing you need to know.